Hi and welcome back to Both Sides Book Club.
This is our second episode and it is our first episode where we get to talk with each other and with you guys about the first book that we've read with you all, which is There Was Still Love by Favel, Parrett. Firstly, before we get into the episode, we would like to thank you all so much. We've
Absolutely
been blown away by how much support we've had over the last 2 weeks from launching to now. And it's making us so excited seeing how many of you are reading with us. So let's dive in.
So as Katie's already said, our very first book is There Was Still Love by Favel, Parrett. I chose this book because Favel is one of my favourite Australian writers. Her writing is just so deceptively simple and so beautiful. It's recently won the Indie Award for Best Novel of the Year and was shortlisted also for the Stellar Award. And I just felt that it was such an appropriate book for the current times when so many people are separated from their families and having to communicate in a different way. So just if you haven't read the book yet, just a little bit of a recap about the storyline. The book is the story of two sisters who were born in Czechoslovakia, and at the age of 17 they were separated. One of them stayed in Czechoslovakia and the other one ultimately ended up in Australia. The book's told through their respective grandchildren's eyes, and it's a story of the relationships between the two sisters, about the meaning of home, about the ties of love, from the grandparents to their grandchildren and between the sisters. And it's just such a beautiful story.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed reading this. But before we get into discussing this book, I really wanted to read you all my favourite quote from this book. And it's only kind of funny now because of what's going on in the world with the coronavirus. And I'm sure Favel has incredible intuition, but I'm not quite sure she quite knew that this was going to happen when she was writing the book. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. But anyways, I really wanted to read it to you because I thought it was really funny when I read it. So here we go. They had run out of toilet paper, and it had been a 3-day mission trekking around the streets to find some. They had used cut-up newspaper, and Uncle Bill said it hurt his ass. He told Ludek that it was like going back to the bloody days of rationing. Ludek had no idea what that meant. Babby was embarrassed, but there was nothing for it. There was no toilet paper in the whole goddamn city, and no amount of money or haggling or wheeling or dealing could get you in. No matter how badly you needed it, no matter how much your ass hurt, that's just the way it was. I just thought it was so funny. Like when I read this, because when you picked this and you were like, oh, it's, Mum spoke to me and she's like, oh, I think it's a really good book for our first book because it kind of relates to a lot of the themes that are going on in the world at the moment with everyone in isolation. And literally it's like it's on page 33 of the book for any of you that have the book at home. And when I read it, I just burst out laughing, just going, this is so funny. So anyway, just a funny point. But let's jump into chatting more about the novel.
One of the things that I enjoyed most about the book is the way that the story was told through the eyes of the two children, the Ludek in Prague and Little Fox in Melbourne. And the events of the book unfolded around them, but we viewed them through a child's eyes. How effective did you feel that was as a way of telling a story?
I think it's a brilliant example of how we can use our imagination. Like, I felt because we used because Favel used a child's perspective to talk about what was going on, you had this beautiful balance of innocence and observing, but then you had to kind of, as an adult and getting a bit of perspective on it, you had to use your imagination to fill in the gaps.
Yeah. I mean, I because children see what's around them, don't they? They're very literal in what they see and the observations that they make.
Yeah.
And they have their own frame of reference that doesn't go any further than their immediate frame of reference.
Exactly. And they pick up, I think, so much more than what we often give children credit for. But you're right, their point of reference isn't quite, it hasn't got as much depth. Yeah. So even though they're aware of what's going on, it's kind of like they start to understand it in some ways, and then their childish imagination then runs along.
Or they
with
might
the
give
story.
it a completely different interpretation.
Exactly, yeah.
They'll make up an interpretation of what's happening and what they're seeing through their own perspectives.
Yeah. I think a really good example of that is the story of Atlas.
Mm-hmm.
You see this really awesome unveiling of Ludek searching for Atlas and taking it really literally. Yeah. And like, it's his challenge to go and find Atlas. And then as the story continues, you start to see the symbolism of Atlas and how other people and people that are around you that might hold the world on their shoulders for you and to help you get through something.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the awesome thing that mums do.
That was actually
world apart. World together all the time.
Well, that's actually a great segue, quite coincidentally, into one of my favourite passages in the book. So my turn to read now. Yeah. Babby's hand was on his shoulder now. It was warm and solid, and he felt her take it all like always. Take the weight. Take the bad feelings. They lifted off him and sunk down in her large body. They became solid in her flesh. Ludek paused in the doorway. He looked at her, his Babby. All those years of carrying so much, all the years of being stuck and having to keep everything going. And he knew that Babby held it all so he didn't have to. Babby held it all so that he could stay free. He wasn't like Atlas, but she was.
I'm getting goosebumps.
I know.
Favel, just so you know, you've made me cry so many times in this book.
Yeah.
Oof.
Which I think is why the book is so very clever, that superficially it's a story of two sisters, but there are so many different relationships that are integral to the story. And the fact that the two grandmothers have taken over the role of mothers to Ludek and to Eliska, really, I think, adds, each in their own way, in their separate countries, they're doing exactly the same thing, protecting their children or their grandchildren.
For me, I really saw myself as Ludek throughout the story, and I had this sense of nostalgia because it took me back to being a child where, there were adult incidences that were disguised from me, and I took my imagination off into, this is what must be happening. But I'd really like to know where you saw yourself in the story, because I think, in some way we all kind of try and draw alliance to certain characters and what we found similar in ourselves. But because you're a mum, I just wanted to know where you saw yourself. Did you see yourself as Ludek, or did you see yourself as Barbie or his mum, or where did you see yourself?
I actually saw myself in both of the children, because a lot of the story was set in 1980, and I was around. Obviously, you weren't in 1980. So a lot of the things that were written about that time felt familiar to me. I mean, I still remember my grandparents and Ludek's Little Fox's relationship with their grandmothers felt totally real and authentic to me, and I could completely empathize and be with those young children. But by the same token, I also felt an affinity with the two grandmothers. You don't have children, so I guess it's more of a maternal thing than it being from a grandparent's perspective. But, you know, that whole symbolism of protecting your children and doing whatever you can to shield them and to guide them and to always be there, no matter what life throws at you, I think is something that would have resonance with every mother.
Earlier you were talking about how Favel has this amazing ability to make something quite complex quite simple, and I think part of that is she's made so, like, you get this sense of nostalgia in quite a complex story, but for each of us that read it, it feels quite simple and quite true to yourself. Like, I felt, you know, and we'd had lots of Instagram people come in on Instagram saying as well they had this sense of nostalgia for Prague, even though they've never been there. And Favel does this amazing job of it just being so multi-sensory that you just feel like you're sitting in Barbie's house or you're in Melbourne and you're running through the streets of Prague looking for Atlas. And I think the thing that I really, really enjoyed and how she creates that sense of nostalgia is through how she uses multisensory things. Like, I remember when I first started reading the book, I started to read it in bed in the evenings, and I kept kind of stumbling on the first couple paragraphs, and I thought, no, this book needs time, and it needs you to listen to it and hear it and touch it and smell it and absorb it. You know, it's not something that you could just read mindlessly, but not that it takes a lot of like energy to read it, but it just is such a sensorial experience. Yeah. And I think she does that through, you know, tasting the pickles and all these layers of symbolism, even the music that she's playing, that Ludek keeps finding of his mother's. And I think that was something that made me go, oh, you know, take me back to sense of nostalgia is growing up in my family, in our family. They all sing a lot.
We do.
Not professionally. But
not on camera, but we sing a lot.
Not professionally either, but we take it quite seriously in the kitchen and whatever. And when Ludek goes to put on the record or encourages Barbie, can we listen to this or whatever, that made me go, oh, like took me back to my own memories. And I think that's what Favel does so cleverly is that there are quite specific things that you can see as part of her journey, but somehow everybody can take elements of it and create their own journey in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think nostalgia is really quite difficult for an author to get right. I think it's quite a complex thing to make it feel authentic. And what you're actually just saying, I think, is really interesting, because nostalgia generally is a feeling of fondness about something or a place that you remember, or something that reminds you of a happy time in your life. Neither of us have ever been to Prague.
No.
And many of our readers haven't either.
Yeah.
You weren't alive in the 1980s, so all of those small details that perhaps have meaning to...
Literal meaning.
A memory, sparking off a memory for people of my generation. You don't have that, but yet you still felt nostalgic. Our background is not Czechoslovakian, so a lot of the food imagery is not necessarily food and so on that we have eaten. But yet they still manage to invoke that amazing sense of missing this.
And I think I actually listened to an interview that Favel did, and I thought it perfectly summed us up, and what makes us all special in families and connections is that it's not necessarily the facts of what happened, but it's the stories. It's the little things. It's the, for me...
It's the details.
For me, every time I see a cucumber, I think of my grandma and think of... And think of... the
cucumber
sandwiches.
Which she used to put far too much butter on.
Like this much butter. And, it's all the little, those tiny little things that make us up, that draws connection to each other. And I think that's what she does, is she doesn't include the facts. The facts are just that points us in the right direction. But
they're just the background.
She creates all these little tiny stories and these little tiny sensory memories that we all go, oh, I have something like that. And, it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
One of the things that I actually wanted to ask you about, because in this novel it's not so linear in the way that she's written it. It's quite disjointed and you feel like you're jumping between Prague and Melbourne and through different time periods as well.
Yeah.
How did you find reading that? I found it a bit disjointed at first, but then I got into the rhythm. How did you find it?
I have to say I actually really like novels that do jump from time to time or place to place. So I'm quite used to reading in that way, and I find it quite refreshing rather than something that just starts here and ends there. And I think the way Favel did it, was very much undulating, almost like a river, like a tide that gradually as she swapped time and places and different perspectives, we found more and more of the backstory, and it was just gently drifting in without it being blatant or overt.
I think that's how doing that added to what I said before. It wasn't about the facts. It wasn't about this is what happened. It was about remembering all those little elements that piece together exactly what you're saying, like the little river that flows to then turn into, this is what happened.
Yeah, carrying us along with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I think we could easily carry on talking about the book for until the
cows come home.
Exactly, until the cows come home. But we have a very special surprise for you all.
All of those questions that you sent through to us on Instagram story and on our post to ask Favel questions about her novel, we actually have her joining us in a moment.
I'm so excited.
She's going to be answering all of your questions that you sent through.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to Both Sides Book Club.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're so excited to speak to you.
I'm excited too. It's really great. Even in these weird times, at least we have technology. Although, doesn't it feel strange to dress up to sit in the room at home? And
Yeah, totally.
I was speaking to one of my friends before we came on this to set up this, and she said, "Oh, what are you doing?" "Oh, just doing my makeup." "And what for?" Well,
I know.
Filming an episode. So thank you so much for being here with us. We're very excited. And before we get started with some questions for you, we would love to ask you straight off the bat if you could tell us 5 things about yourself, just for people that are jumping in and listening that might not have previously caught up with us.
Okay. I volunteer at a dingo sanctuary twice a week, which I love absolutely.
Yeah.
It's really hard physical work, but you get lots of dingo cuddles.
Yeah. Oh, gorgeous.
I love surfing. I just surfed before and then quickly jumped in the shower.
Yeah, girl, me too.
We're lucky down here at the coast because we're allowed to surf still, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I love hiking and bushwalking. I think more than anything I love being in the wild.
Yeah.
I'm writing a middle grade fiction book about a dingo at the moment.
Oh,
awesome. Fantastic.
He's a very famous dingo who was taken by an eagle as a puppy and dropped into a backyard in Victoria and found at 5 weeks old. And the woman who found him didn't know if he was a fox, a dog, what.
Or what?
She called the ranger, and he came to the sanctuary and was DNA tested, and he's 100% pure alpine dingo, which is the rarest dingo there is.
Oh, my goodness.
So he's got 60,000 followers on Instagram. He's very famous now.
We'll have to find it and give it a shout out.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
It's just at Wongi Dingo.
Perfect.
What have you been doing during isolation?
Well, I should be writing because it's the perfect time to, but I've been doing everything but. I'm building a deck at the front of my beach house. I've been baking a lot, painting, crocheting, which I love. But I really have to start writing because I've got a deadline. So
I feel like because I work as a photographer and I do filming as well, and I feel like it's funny because just all this pressure on to be productive during this time. And for me personally, I've found getting into the brain of getting into work mode has actually been really hard.
Exactly. I feel the same. And maybe that it's we've lost our normal routine.
Yeah.
And we have to create our own. So it'll take a while. Maybe in a few weeks we'll be settled in.
Yeah.
And sick of baking and sick of
or
sick of eating.
Or hopefully freer again.
Yes. But what you guys are doing is amazing because artists have been hit really hard like everyone with this, and for our books to keep selling during this time is so important. And all people like you are doing amazing things, amazing book clubs, bookshops are doing, I know in Torquay here they're doing free deliveries. You can ring and just order the book and the owner will drive to your house instantly.
Yeah, our local bookshop here is as well, which is just absolutely terrific.
So as you know, we sent out to our people on Instagram a little sticker to ask you some questions. And actually it's been really awesome. The response, this is our first book review that we've done, as I'm sure you've listened. We've just done the intro.
Yeah.
And we're just so blown away by how many people jumped on straight away and just sent in so many beautiful comments about your book as well, which is really nice.
Oh, that's so lovely to hear.
Yeah. So it's not just us that have absolutely adored it. It's everybody that we've reached as well. So thank you for writing it.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so you ready for some questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, There Was Still Love is a love song to your grandparents. Can you tell us a little bit about them and your childhood memories of them?
Yeah. Oh, my grandparents were the best. The flat is very real. So all of those parts are my memories of this flat and these people. But my little brother was there and also my cousins many times, and we all shared the same feeling for these people that staying with them was the best. The food was great. The time, like learning to play cards and just hanging out with these people who were very poor, working class, never owned a house, but had time and love, which is all that kids really need.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I think of my first home, heart home, it's this flat. So my parents were alive. They were building a house and living in a caravan. So my brother and I would stay with my grandparents on the weekdays and then stay with my parents on the weekend. And it was fabulous. Like, I'm so grateful that happened because it gave us these years with these people, and I wouldn't take it back for anything.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic.
Oh, that's so nice. The second question is, all of your novels have children as the protagonist. So can you tell us why you chose to narrate your stories through a child's eyes, and specifically in this novel through a grandchild's perspective?
I mean, this book, it's easy to answer that question because it was me. So the memory came of this when I found this jar of gherkins in a deli that was Czech gherkins that I hadn't seen since I was 16. And as soon as I ate one, I burst into tears. And I just remembered this ritual of a roll with a gherkin on the side, one for me, one for my grandma, and one for my grandpa. And so I was instantly a little kid again at that table with the two people I loved the most. So those parts were easy. It was always going to be a kid's voice. So it's me. Yeah. It's my memories.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then I suddenly had this boy in Prague, and I thought, well, that's so interesting, these two grandchildren telling the story of these sisters rather than it coming from them.
Yeah.
And what that gives the reader is heaps of gaps because children don't understand everything that's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of room there for the reader to be thinking what's happening here, what's going on. And I love that. That's the kind of book I like to read where not everything's answered.
Yeah.
I'm also fascinated by kids just they're constantly trying to work out the energy in the room. They know things are going on. They totally know, but they are constantly trying to work out what's happening. what's happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's just, for a writer, that's an amazing problem to overcome.
Yeah. And you do it so beautifully.
Thank you so much.
It works.
I think as well when you're talking about how when you're talking through a child's perspective, how it creates these gaps. And I think as the reader, as you're saying, it allows these gaps for us to weave in what we might see ourselves in those situations. And when we were discussing your book just before, we were talking about how those gaps allow you to see yourself in the book as different characters as well.
Yeah, that's great. I guess I'm always trying to do that by drafting as well. So I start out maybe telling more and then I pare it back until I've just got the essence of the scene.
Yeah.
And that's not for everyone. That annoys some readers, and that's totally fine. There's all different types of books and there's all different types of readers. But I know for me, if I'm told too much, I get annoyed because my brain wants to problem solve.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other things we were actually talking about is just that, the way the different viewpoints and the way the narrative meanders, so that bit by bit, you do get more of the backstory. But it's not in your face. It's not so overt.
And I also believe that memory, it isn't this full backstory. We don't suddenly go, oh, I remember this, and then we understand everything.
Yeah.
It's really fleeting. It's in and out. There's things happening. I'm eating a gherkin, remembering this flat, but I'm also here in the present thinking, I wish I knew more about my grandparents. So there's timelines going on. Memory is just little bits, little flashes.
That's so true.
I'm trying to capture that as well.
So you use a lot of very poignant symbolism in the novel, particularly the garnet earrings, which is so wonderful, the little brown suitcase, the gherkins, as we've already talked about, and the so-called jacket. What inspired the choice behind each of those items? And did you find it difficult to blend your personal recollections and memories with fiction in those cases?
That's a great question. I use symbolism a lot. All of it is unconscious and organic. So I'm never like, I'm going to put a suitcase in here or a gherkin or a garnet earrings. And once I start to draft, I see that I have too many symbols often, too many competing. If you have too many competing, then they lose all their power.
Yeah.
So then I decide which ones are really singing. And the golden garnet earrings is a real thing that my grandma had, and many Eastern European people have from birth of that generation.
Right.
So gold earrings that their ears are pierced when they're very young.
Yeah.
And they keep them all their lives. So that was a real memory. The suitcase came last, and I thought, what really sums up World War II without me going into the war so much? And to me, it's the little leather suitcase.
Yeah.
And something amazing happened. A young child at one of my events asked a question, and he said, why does it have to be a brown suitcase? Because I have a red suitcase. And everybody laughed, but it was great because what it highlighted is we understand what a little brown suitcase means, that then there was leather, that was what suitcases were made out of. But now refugees travel with all sorts of bags, backpacks, and it was a great question that this young child doesn't understand the reference of the little brown suitcase.
Just another note on symbolism. This is a personal question. It's not coming from somebody. But I was wondering if you could comment on the little fox a little bit more, because you do use symbolism so well and it takes us to different places and memories. But besides the nickname, the little fox, is that maybe you in it, or?
It's funny. I wish that had been my nickname. My grandpa called me like the equivalent of blood nut, so in Czech, which means sort of redhead. Yeah. So it's not as romantic. I was really struggling with a name. I wasn't going to name this girl at all. But then it became important, and I spoke to my cousin in Prague who's the same age as me, and I said, what would a nickname for a redhead be? He goes, maybe Fox. And I said, what about we make it Little Fox to make it really sweet? Yeah. So that's how he helped me with that. And then it stuck, and I feel like it is me now. It's because I've written it. It feels like the truth now.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Cute.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we've already talked about, the next question is, what sources did you use to research the historical background to the story? I mean, we know, can you tell us a little bit more about your cousin and about what other sources you used?
This was one of those crazy, lucky things that happen sometimes when you're in a book. So my cousin and I have not spoken for 25 years.
Yeah.
We just lost touch.
Yeah.
So I'm into this book and I'm writing about this young boy in Prague, communist Prague, but I'm feeling really uncomfortable because I don't feel like I have the authority to write this story. I didn't live it. I don't know what it's like. I don't want it to be a cliche of communist Prague. I want it to be real life. So if you looked into an apartment and saw a family, that's what I want to write.
Yeah.
So suddenly Facebook, it's amazing. He found me on Facebook. We started chatting, and I told him what I was doing, and he just said, ask me questions. I want to be back in the flat with my grandma, my bubby,
oh, wow.
which is my grandma's sister. So he grew up with her.
Wow.
And so for a year, every day I would write, and then in the evening we'd message for about an hour. And I asked him a million questions. So I couldn't have written this book without him. So the details of Ludzic all come from him. And the only other research I did is I watched a lot of videos on the so-called gymnastics and the big slips, which they're insane. I mean, they go for about 5 hours, the whole thing. I watched a lot of that. I like newspapers, magazines at the time, footage. And I also stuck black and white photos of Prague all over my wall.
Oh, nice.
Photos from the 70s and 80s, that really helped.
Yeah. It's amazing, that visualization process and how it can
really important.
Transport you through. I mean, I watched your did a bit of stalking on you and I watched one of your interviews where you were talking about playing the music while you were writing. And to me, that completely it struck a chord with me, because that's what I do for my creative process, is I like immerse myself into music to get me.
That's great. It's really, it's a really good way to sink down, isn't it? Because you can be procrastinating when you first go into your office. And so if every day I have the task of just listening to music, I mean, that feels like a nice thing. It's not the hard bit of writing. Yeah. But as soon as I play, either Nights in White Satin or some of the Tchaikovsky pieces I was listening to, I just drop right in to the book, and then it's coming.
Yeah. And it's funny because I feel like that came out in your book as well, when you're talking about the scenes of putting the record on. I felt, this might sound creepy, but I felt like you were there with me in the room, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's so cool. Absolutely. I mean, music's really a big part of this book. Yeah. And it was a big part of my childhood, my grandpa listening to classical music. And then my cousin, he had, his mum listening to the Rolling Stones, which were completely illegal. it was illegal to listen to the Rolling Stones. So she was this sort of like had this edge of like danger and rebellion.
Okay, so can you share a little bit more about the quietness of the before and the oblique way in which the novel references the war? Do you feel like the role of the novelist is to educate future generations about important moments in history?
Oh, that's a great question. I didn't want to be this book to completely be in the war, but the war is all through it because of people's pain, their experience, their dislocation, their displacement. Yeah. So the war is all through it, but it's not the story. The story is a quiet story about family. So I needed the war to be, you know, stories of before. Before was never spoken about. Before's put away in the cupboard. Yeah. And that generation, I think this is a very common thing of that generation who lived through World War II, was to only look forward.
Yeah, I mean they didn't talk about it.
They did not talk about it. And that's whether they live in Australia, whether they live in Russia, whether they live in America. Yeah. It's a thing about the new hope of the future, and everything was about the children and the grandchildren and looking forward. Yeah. So my grandparents really never spoke about themselves at all. And that's common. So I had this idea that it's locked away in the attic in a little suitcase. Yeah. And I thought that was quite powerful.
Yeah. You know? Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. On a kind of another side topic, just because I keep getting these funny things that I think about, I want to ask you, are you psychic about the world toilet paper crisis? Because you, word for word, predict the toilet paper crisis.
Who would have thought we'd ever have this problem here? Honestly, you know, it's so my great aunt, so in Prague, was very good at getting things on the black market, so she could get anything. Yeah. But there was this one time when my grandma and granddad were there, and she couldn't get toilet paper, and no one could, and she was really embarrassed. Like she tried really hard. Yeah. Yeah. And so my cousin said it was funny because they had to use newspaper, which was common, but like my grandpa complained because it was like the war, so in the rationing.
Next question. Can you tell us why you chose not to explain what had happened to Eliska's parents?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get asked this a lot, and it's one of the things that maybe annoys some readers, because it's a whole. Yeah. I did it on purpose. I wanted to black out that middle generation because it's not their story. Apart from Elena a little bit, so Rujek's mum. Yeah. Her story is, you know, quite important. But the other adults of that middle generation, I needed them to be silenced because it isn't their story. Yeah. Their story would be very different. Their relationship with their parents is very different than a grandparent-grandchild relationship. Yeah. So I wanted to focus on that relationship. So I needed the middle generation to be out of the way.
Just to disappear.
So there's only one clue when it says, I never thought about my parents and I didn't need them. So it's when she's lying in bed with the grandma feeling very safe. Yeah. And with Lujek, we knew that his dad died when he was young and his mum was away. Yes. So that's why he's got the loss of parents.
Like for me, it created this like innocence in the nostalgia, I think, which was nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Next one.
Okay. Can you tell us about the origins of the Atlas story? We presume its intent is to illustrate sacrifice, but are curious to know a little bit more from the author's perspective.
I needed a fairy tale or a traditional Czech story that might be told. So I researched, you know, legends of Prague. There's lots. Most of them involve statues coming to life and getting revenged, which is a particularly strong way to get kids to go to bed or eat
do what they're told.
You know, they're scared of these creatures coming to get them. So there's many of them. And none of them are quite right. And then I found the Atlas story, which is a a little it's not as well known as some of the others. And I just thought, wow, this is perfect because it's these grandmas that are holding up the sky for these children at great cost to themselves, at great strain.
Yeah.
But they do it anyway. So then Atlas became this perfect story. And I worried, is it too heavy-handed? Is it too strong? But once it was in there, with Manya telling Vujek the story and him trying to find Atlas, then it was off and it had to say that in the book.
Yeah, yeah. Was the chapter where Even and Manya argue a necessary milestone in the novel to you right from the start, as a means of conveying the equality of their own life experience?
Yeah, I think from the start I knew that the tension of this novel is who had it worse.
Yeah.
That this was what these two sisters deep down was their only issue with each other, like who had it worse. The one that got stuck at home in a pretty full-on communist regime, but was at home. Could speak her language, had connection to the city, to people, to culture. Or the one that's free but doesn't feel at home in this new place. And I wanted to show really, in the end, it's just really sad what happened to all of the normal, everyday people because of the big powers that changed the world.
Yeah, over which they had absolutely no control.
So many small people that will never know their names lost so much on both sides. The ones that got out and the ones that were stuck, everybody lost a lot. So, and in the end I needed these two sisters to forgive each other. Yeah. Because this is the last time they see each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was definitely the point in the novel where I started crying. Thank you, Favel, for making me cry. Okay, so we've got two more for you. When you spend a great deal of time editing and redrafting what you wrote, and you wrote that.
We've talked a little bit about this already.
But can you describe a bit more about the process for this?
Yeah. So I don't write in order, and I didn't write this book in order. So I wrote scenes as they came, and I called them things like The Truth, where my grandpa gets the job delivering the Truth newspaper, or The Magician, or they were each one had a title. And once they're written, I have to get them perfect before I can move on to the next scene, which might involve 16 full edits. And that's a lot, even for me. That's a lot. So I felt like my grandparents were behind me and it had to be perfect for them. Another thing I'd like to say is I didn't believe this book would be published. So I was writing it for them and for me. They were in the room with me, which was so nice. So I was obsessive. I didn't want to do anything else. I didn't see friends. I didn't go out. I just worked because I wanted to be with them in that flat. It was this really lovely time. But it had to be perfect, so I was the hardest I've ever been on myself. And I just, raked it till it was word perfect in my mind. The edit wasn't hard because I'd done a lot of work. It was more continuity or just changing some grammar. I was surprised that Ashet liked it. So I sent it because I did owe them a book and I thought I'd be rejected. And instead the CEO rang me and just went crazy about how much she loved it, and she's never called me before. So I'm really surprised how it's gone, that people find something in it. I mean, to me, it was just a gentle story about my grandparents. I can see that maybe there's something in it, but I didn't think it would go well or be well received or anything. So it's been a massive surprise. And I feel very proud that people are reading my grandparents' story. And thinking about their family. People come up to me at every event and talk about their grandparents. It's really lovely.
I think, that was just so beautiful. But I think the thing that really struck me in your book is you can tell you're vulnerable in it. And I think through vulnerability, you create a sense of authenticity, which resonates in people. And I think that's how it's like the ultimate form of connection. And I think in any creative medium that we do, like in a photograph or a film or whatever, you can always feel, it's like a multi-sensory thing you can feel when it's authentic, when it's, when it's and vulnerable, and you can feel that vulnerability. And I think what it does is it encourages a vulnerability in yourself as a reader to be vulnerable in the story, Yeah,
I really did feel this one so much, and it hasn't gone away. Like on tour, I will almost cry every time I do the same reading every event. I did it every day for 3 months.
Yeah.
And it would still, hit me right in my heart. Like this, I just want to be back there. These people, I want to be there so much, more than anything.
With being vulnerable myself, with being vulnerable in the book, it was making me go, oh man, like I want to chat to my grandparents more. I want to find out more. I want to have a way to sort of, reach for a deeper connection.
I'd love to say to people, if your grandparents are still alive, please immediately go and talk to them. You have no idea how long you'll have them for. It often feels like we'll have people forever. And so ask them just about them, their everyday stories, when they fell in love, what they were frightened of when they were young, what they used to play, what they loved, what they wanted to be. They're the things that when people are gone, we'll never know. We'll know dates and facts, but we'll never know, like, heart stories.
Because that's actually what our last question is.
That was actually our last question. That was actually the last question. Is that, if you could talk to your grandparents here today, what would you ask them?
I'd give anything for an hour with them, and just to say, firstly, thank you so much for everything, like for the love and the time. Then I just want to know everything about them. There's so much I don't know. I don't know why my grandma was forced to leave Czechoslovakia. Yeah. It's still a family secret that's gone now.
Yeah.
How my grandma and grandpa met. Oh, just so many things. I just listen to them talk. Mm. Yeah. And maybe ask my grandma to make some schnitzels and
Thank you so much.
Thank you for choosing my book. It's just such a privilege, and to be the first, it's so great. Thank you so much.
Well, we love you.
Yeah, we do.
And you're so sweet in person too, so thank you so much for coming in, and also being open to sharing your story with everybody that's listening along as well. And we hope that speaking to you has touched their hearts as much as it has ours.
Yeah, I hope so too. And if anyone has any more questions, you can maybe you can forward them on via email to me or whatever if someone's missed out.
Oh, we'd love to. Yeah, we'd we'd absolutely love to.
One question for you. What's the next book on the list?
Is
that a secret?
No. We're just about to announce it on our episode, actually.
Okay, I'll have to wait then because I'd love to join in.
Well, please, absolutely.
We would love you to.
We would absolutely love you to join our book club.
Okay. Absolutely, I can't wait.
Okay, perfect.
Well, thank you so much, Favel.
Thanks, Favel.
Big love, and
we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you for joining us on Both Sides Book Club. We hope that you enjoyed our conversation with Favel just as much as we did. So tell us about our next book.
Our next book is American Dirt by Jeanine Cummins. It's an extraordinary work of fiction that's inspired by the courageous immigrants that cross the Mexican and US border daily. It's an incredible story of a mother's love for her son and the lengths that she goes to protect him. I loved this book. I read it in a day. I completely binge read it, and I hope that you will enjoy it as much as I did. We hope you liked this episode. Please subscribe and leave us a review if you did. Also, we're on Instagram at bothsides.bookclub. Happy reading, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.